Thank you, Marta, for the introduction. And it's true that I'm going to present a rating scale, which is a tool that has been developed by the Paris Financial Center Impact Taskforce working group on the rating scale, which is a very long name. So it's clear that we speak the same language, all of us, which is very good news. So we will discuss exactly the same things. We had discussed exactly the same things with the working group of Finance for Tomorrow. And there would be no problem understanding each other, which is a very good thing. So I'm going to present you the results of the work of the working group that has taken like 1.5 years to achieve that kind of result. So it's a rating scale for all funds based on their potential to contribute to the sustainable transformation. So it's not only to assess self-labeled impact funds. No, it's for all funds that want to be assessed and to try to monitor how impactful they can be based on their process, but also based on their achieved results. So I'm going to present you this and make it clear what Finance for Tomorrow is, what the task force is, and what the working group is. So as I just said, it has been developed by Finance for Tomorrow, which is an initiative of the Paris Europlace, which is the marketplace association for the Paris Financial Center. And within Europlace, you have different working groups, including one on impact. There are other ones that are trying to promote the development of branches of finance dedicated to sustainable finance. There could be another, there is another working group on natural capital, for instance. But here I'm talking about the one on impact. And within the task force about impact, there is different working groups, including the one we are discussing today that has developed the grid, the rating scale. Before the rating scale, there was a definition. And even if my Spanish is very rotten, I think, Marta, you discussed the definition of France of impact and impact finance. So it's true that we are building our work on a definition that was provided last year about impact finance. And that definition includes the same as for Gianluca, the three components: intentionality, additionality, and impact measurement. And I heard the question by Maria about France that was so much into investing impact and not investor impact, which is not true to me. You will see that additionality is meant in a sense that is investor additionality, and it's investor impact for sure, not investee impact. So you will see that our work is definitely focusing on investor impact and not investing impact. What the purpose of the grid? Many different types of purposes to help funds to self-assess their practices, to promote a good pedagogy about the impact concepts and impact methods. Also to, if it's used, if it's disclosed, the rating, it can be used for information for investors to compare the different funds, and especially the one that self-label impact funds. That could be also used, and that's the core of the discussion, to be to label impact funds. There could be at some point in France a label for impact funds, and that is currently discussed, and it could take place within the existing label ESR or outside of that label. So that is really the ongoing question. So now I'm gonna tell you the different methodological points of the rating scale. There were a lot of discussions, so we had to make decisions about some crucial methodological points. So first, the purpose of the grid was to provide an assessment for all types of funds, not only self-labeled impact funds, and not only ones operating, let's say, in private markets. No, it has to be used the same way for funds operating in private markets and in public markets, which is complex because they they cannot apply the same impact mechanisms. And so it is to assess them, but also if we want to label, to provide at the end a label, we need some minimum threshold below which you cannot fall. So we had to think about a list of qualifying questions on top of the tool that is providing a rating. So at the end, we made a series of choices. So the grid is definitely about impact and contribution and not ESG at all. So it's not, again, another form of label of socially responsible investing. No. It deals with contribution and not only impact, because it is a way to not put the problematic measurements of investor impact at the center of the grid. So you will see we have to be very clever in how we put questions about impact measurements without limiting too much the scope of the tool. We included 2 ways to have an impact, which is supporting companies with a positive impact, but also help companies that have a negative impact to transition towards a more positive impact. So that includes 2 pathways, let's say a transformation pathway, a transition pathway, and a positive support pathway. We also decided to use the same tool for all types of funds. So there is no rating scale for private equity funds and another scale for public equity funds. No, the same scale for everybody. There was another question also, which was a question about what are we doing with the new funds that have absolutely not fully invested so far and that cannot present any results from their past investments. So we have decided that the grid, the tool, will be used only for funds with at minimum 2 years maturity, so that they can show their action, their investment, their processes, and also their achieved results. So if you are not 2-year-old, you cannot get a full rating for your fund. Then there is a question of additionality. So it is clear that what we are interested in is investor additionality. So no doubt about this. But we wanted to think as well in terms of additionality of the actions performed by the investor, which is basically what Gianluca presented a few minutes ago, but also additionality in the outcome, in the results. So you want to have an impact, let's say, on carbon emissions. What was your impact? What was the part of your investee impact that is attributable to your actions? So there is an incorporation of additionality at 2 levels, at the level of actions, but also at the level of achieved results. So that is on paper what is considered. But additionality, because of the lack of agreement of the methods to prove and demonstrate additionality, we have considered additionality in outcomes as a source of 1 or 2 questions, but it's not a requisite that you can measure your additionality with the most advanced econometric techniques. So it is part of the questions, but it's not a qualifying question, this. And there were a lot of hot topics that were debated, and not to block the advancement of the tool, we decided that some very unsolved topics were used by blank questions that are not used for providing a rating, but that still help you to self-assess and that will show the way for future improvements of the tool. So there are a few questions, there are 5 questions that do not provide any points for our tool. They are used for a blank free self-assessment. So now I can present you the grid and the structure of the grid. So it's made of 4 sections. First section is about the theory of change and how you can describe in details your theory of change and the different actions you plan to implement. The second section is how you actually implemented your theory of change. The third section is about the monitoring and achievement of outcomes, with a subpart on your monitoring process and another part on the actual results you achieved. And finally, there is a fourth section that is on how you communicate about your impact. Do you draw a clear distinction between, let's say, a company impact, investee impact, and investor impact? So is your communication about your impact fully in line with the assessment of your methods and results that were provided in the first three sections? The whole of it gives you a total that can reach a maximum of 100 points. The first three sections are each worth 30 points, and the final one is worth 10 points. So we have come to that conclusion, to that tool, after 12 iterations. It has been a very long process, a lot of discussions with all the stakeholders. So and there was very hot topics between the private equity funds and the public equity funds. Some say that some questions do provide an advantage for the other group, and vice versa. So it was pretty intense. And there were a few questions that were super hotly debated. And I can tell you, the one that created the most problems by far is the one on compensation. How should the compensation of fund managers included into the grid, into the rating scale? And it was a nightmare to combine the different views and come up with an intelligent solution. So that question was really super complex to handle. And at the end, if you want, I will explain the solution. But here, I just want to provide you the full structure. So if you, as part of the use of the tool, it is to provide a kind of recognition of impact funds. So what's the criteria to be called an impact fund according to Finance for Tomorrow? You need to satisfy two criteria. First one, you have to achieve a minimum score of 70% of the total 100 points. So you need 70 points out of 100 minimum. And second condition, you have to validate 12 crucial questions that are called qualifying questions. And for all of them, you have to reach the minimum standard. If you fail to reach that standard, you cannot be called an impact fund, and you cannot sign a charter for impact funds. So that could be demanding for some, because some processes so far in the market are not completely in line with what is a minimum threshold according to the working group. Before that final iteration of the tool, we ask our members to self-assess their funds and provide us with the ratings. And this is what we got from them. The ratings went from 40% to, let's say, a maximum of close to 80%. And it's true that there was a slight advantage for funds operating in private markets. That's true. So on average, they were scoring slightly better, but not so much. And only a handful of them were capable to go beyond 70%, which means that the score of 70% is currently pretty demanding. But this is our goal. It is to advance the methods and the processes within the market. So we are pretty happy with that result. I also provided in the slide the series of 12 questions that are necessary to validate if you want to self-label to be called an impact fund. And they are dealing with the three cornerstones of intentionality, additionality, and measurement or measurability. So this is how we are right now. The tool is finalized. Now it has to be edited, and it will become public on the website of Finance for Tomorrow. And now there are discussions with some stakeholder groups so that they can endorse the grid that could, at the end of the way, perhaps be used as the basis for an impact label in France. We agreed that that current version of the rating scale is not a final one. Every 6 months, there will be a revision of the scale so that we can upgrade the minimum thresholds. We can provide clarified guidelines about methods, because so far some methods, especially about impact measurement, are still very vague. A lot of actors within the field don't know how to measure their own impact. So we need to agree on a list of measurement practices that would be acceptable. And perhaps, and I hope, and I definitely hope so, there would be a constant expansion of the dimension that are assessed by the grid. And I can provide an example with the indirect effects. Here, I do not mean indirect effects in the same sense as Gianluca said. He said indirect effects is through an investment vehicle. Here, I'm talking about your effects, not on your investees, but your effects on the rest of the ecosystem. Like you can have effect on other companies if they imitate the change performed in your investee, for instance. Or there could be, on the other way, there could be a substitution effect. So you can improve the outcome of your investees, but at the detriment of the outcomes of competitors, for instance. So we need, at some point, we will need to include the estimation of indirect effects as well, or at least the thinking of it. But so far, it's not there. So that first version is finalized, but definitely there will be new versions in the future. So I tried to make it short. If you have any question, please ask them, and I will be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Michael. It's been very, very interesting for the audience, I guess. Any question, comments? Okay, we have here, Jose.
Hello, thank you very much for the explanation. Just one question: how many funds did you go through the rating process, and how many of which went beyond the 70% and rated as impact funds in accordance with the system you have presented?
There were different iterations of the grid, and we had up to 20 answers. And out of them, you can, let's say, 4 or 5 met the threshold. Only 4 or 5.
Thank you very much.
And it was self-disclosed, so it was not audited by an external auditor. So it's all about interpretation. Maybe their real rating should not be as high as they claim. I cannot be sure so far.
And building on Jose's question, how many of these 4 or 5 were operating in public markets?
Three. Let's say I don't have the full figures in my head, but let's say 60% of them. But there were 1 or 2 that were operating in public markets. So it was definitely possible to meet the threshold if you are operating in public markets. But you have to do some additional actions like engagement, for instance. If you don't do an active engagement policy, it will be pretty complex to meet the threshold.
Hi, Michael. It's Maria again. Thank you for the comment. We'll have a discussion privately on France. I have a question. How far is this tool? How far away is it from becoming a market standard, something that all investors could look at as a reference? And also, what steps or how do you see that in the future will link to the EU regulation?
So to become a market standard in France, it will be very political because there are, let's say, I wouldn't say oppositions, but frictions with other actors because they have their own label so far, or because they have their own tools. So they are actors that we still have to, how can I say, convince. So now it becomes a political process, definitely between the big stakeholders. And we'll see. We really hope that work that was done by a group of more than 40 institutions become a market standard, but we cannot be fully sure.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I find it's an extremely useful tool for fundraising with clients. I've had the debate for a long time. I've seen also consultants that have their own grid, but it's far from being accepted as a market standard. And I find it also extremely useful for fund of funds. So I really hope you're successful. I think there you have an example of Initiativa Carbone International, which was French-led, and then now it's accepted by UNPRI. So I hope this tool will follow the same path. I
cross my fingers. And then for the regulation, we are there. So here I'm not talking about Finance for Tomorrow because I'm working for a think tank, which is a 2 Degrees Investing Initiative, and we are approached by ESMA, for instance, to and the European Commission for they're thinking about the change in the SFDR categories, etc. But we are definitely pushing forward the adoption of a category for impact investment, which will not be Article 9, which is something else. And the question is, how demanding would that category be? And there are still discussions ongoing about should it be very large, including what Gianluca called investment for with impact, or only the most demanding form, which is investing for impact, according to Gianluca. But we can come with something pretty similar. So to us, the next step would be to include a new article about impact products, and not to connect it too much with SFDR. SFDR Article 9, because that creates some problems, like the problems with the transition funds. If you really try to transform from the inside companies with a negative impact, that would be super complex to be called Article 9. So there are some adaptations to be made at the regulation level.
Hi, Michael. Marc Miralles from Soma Capital. Thank you very much again for your presentation. Actually, you just mentioned one very important thing about how regulation will evolve and the impact on impact investing. And I was wondering whether you have included currently in the rating questions about assurance and not only data assurance, but also assurance about processes and how the engagement is actually performed, whether it's currently included or it's something you might be including in the future, also relating to the potentiality that in the future EU taxonomy, SFDR and other regulations of the sustainable regulation package might also come up with new developments on assurance.
What do you mean by assurance? I'm not sure I'm following you about this. Could you just rephrase that part on assurance?
Sure, no problem. So currently the issue that some impact investors find is the lack of standards on obtaining third-party assurance on whether the methodologies or the metrics or the impact outcomes that they measure are actually being achieved and aligned with the objectives that they are seeking. So let's say that the regulation does not include yet a need for assurance also to demonstrate the categorization under SFDR or EU taxonomy, but it's something that it's being discussed. So I was wondering actually whether this is already included in the rating or it's meant to be included in the future, and how is your approach to that?
Okay, I get it now. I would say in between. The grid is not yes or no. It is for each question you can be rated 0, 1, 2, 3. So for each question, we define thresholds so that you can get a 1, a 2, or a 3. So we had to make choices about what is worth a 1, what is worth a 2, what is worth a 3. So for all the impact mechanisms that have been explained by Gianluca, they are basically from IMP. So let's say signaling, undersupplied markets, etc., provision of flexible capital. We created some standards, let's say, so that they could have 1, 2, or 3. But I have to admit that those standards are still pretty vague because the science is not super advanced into defining what would be a super effective engagement policy, for instance, and what is the difference, the delta in, let's say, financial terms, so that you can call yourself someone providing flexible capital. So we do not have some well-accepted standards for saying it would be super effective, averagely effective, or just poorly effective. So we did some work on it, connected to research, but I have to admit it's still in its infancy. It has to be much more refined. But we already tried, but that's my hope that in the future, because science will advance on those questions, we could provide more precise guidelines and more precise thresholds for giving you access to 1, 2, 3 points for each question. So we tried, but it's far from being perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks so much, Mickaël. I think we don't have more questions. Anyway, we will follow as well your work, and hopefully we will follow how it evolves in the adoption of of this standard in the industry and with the different stakeholders. So we keep in touch, and good luck. Thank you for being with us today. Bueno, ahora ya os damos, bueno, un aplauso, por favor, por supuesto.